Welcome, everyone, to the Complete Aviation Solutions Deep Dive, number 78.
Good to be here.
Today, we're diving straight into some really key developments across the aviation industry. We've pulled together insights from several recent reports.
Yeah, we're looking at airline strategies, some financial pressures, and how geopolitics is weaving its way into the picture. The goal, as always, is to cut through the noise for you.
Absolutely. So, where should we start? Maybe India? There seems to be some friction there.
Right. Let's start there. Reports have surfaced suggesting Air India has actually asked the Indian government to put an end to the lease and code share deal between Indigo and Turkish Airlines.
Okay, that sounds significant. What are the alleged reasons behind that request?
Well, the reports mention a mix of things, business concerns, naturally, but also national security issues, apparently linked to Turkey's foreign policy regarding Pakistan.
Sensitive stuff. But Air India responded.
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
Publicly. An Air India spokesperson called the reports a gross misrepresentation and mischievous reporting, so a strong denial there.
Interesting. But even with the denial, the reports point to something quite specific, right? About aircraft leases.
Exactly. The core issue seems to be the upcoming renewal of Indigo's permit to damp lease Boeing 777s from Turkish Airlines. That permit's up at the end of May next year.
And Indian regulations have specific rules about these leases.
They do. You can only have these wet or damp leases for a maximum of 6 months at a time. So Indigo needs to get an extension basically every 6 months.
How many planes are we talking about?
Just two currently.
Yeah.
Two wide-body 777s leased from Turkish. They've applied for the next extension, but government approval is still pending.
Okay. And what's Indigo's take on this whole partnership?
Well, Indigo's defending it quite strongly. They're saying it's good for Indian travelers, providing, much-needed long-haul capacity.
Especially with international fares being higher post-COVID.
Precisely. They argue it helps keep prices reasonable. And there's a strategic angle, too.
Oh, what's that?
Indigo sees this as a way to sort of test the waters and build experience in the long-haul market. They've got those A321XLRs and A350s on order, remember?
Ah, right. So this is like a stepping stone for their own future long-haul operation.
Exactly. Laying the groundwork, gaining know-how, makes sense from their perspective.
Now, you mentioned geopolitical factors earlier. The reports touched on India-Turkey relations.
Yes, they did. Apparently, things have been a bit strained following some statements made by the Turkish president regarding Kashmir. This even led to some calls within India to boycott Turkish companies.
So real-world politics directly impacting aviation business, potentially.
It certainly looks that way. And it's not just theoretical. India's Bureau of Civil Aviation Security actually revoked the security clearance for Celebi, which is a Turkish ground handling company.
Wow. Operating at major airports like Delhi and Mumbai.
That's right. Celebi is now suing the government over it, so it's quite a tangible impact.
Yet, despite all this, Indigo is still operating some routes that were affected by regional tensions previously.
Yeah, they resumed flights to places like Almaty and Tashkent once the airspace over northern India reopened after the ceasefire in Kashmir. Business carries on where it can.
It's a really complex mix of business strategy, regulation, and international relations. Okay, let's shift focus. What about Nepal Airlines? Sounds like they're facing some ongoing challenges.
Yes, financial challenges mainly. Nepal's Auditor General's office is once again criticizing the airline for not properly servicing its loans. These were loans taken out years ago to buy aircraft.
From state funds, right, like the pension fund.
Exactly. The Employees Provident Fund, or EPF, and the Citizen Investment Trust, CIT. The amounts owed have grown significantly.
How significantly are we talking?
Okay, so as of May this year, they owe about MPR $28.6 billion. That's roughly $209 million to the EPF for two A330s they bought back in 2017. The original loan was closer to $88 million.
Wow, that's more than doubled. And the other loan?
Similar story. They owe about MPR $19.4 billion, or $141 million to the CIT for two A320s they got in 2015. That original loan was around $73 million.
So what's causing the debt to balloon like that? Just interest?
Pretty much. The issue is irregular repayment of both the principal and the interest. So the lenders have been capitalizing that unpaid interest, basically adding it back onto the loan principal.
Ouch. And the Auditor General isn't happy with how that's been handled.
No. They criticize the inconsistent payments by the airline, but also the failure of these state-owned funds to really enforce regular payments.
Has Nepal Airlines tried to address this recently?
They have made some efforts. Back in October 2024, they reported repaying a chunk, about $46 million worth. They also asked the lenders to waive pandemic-era interest and penalties and restructure the debt, but that request wasn't successful.
Any recent payment activity?
There was some news last month. Nepal Airlines put out a press release saying they'd met their monthly payment for the A320s, about 4 million USD. And they paid part of the agreed amount for the A330 debt, around 2 million USD.
So making payments, but perhaps still struggling to meet the full obligations, especially on the larger A330 loan.
Seems that way. The total paid towards the loans as of April this year was around 54 million USD. Still a long way to go.
On a slightly brighter note, operationally, they've got some planes back in the air.
Yes, that's positive news. Both of their smaller DHC-6 Twin Otters are back in service. One just returned this week after being grounded for nearly a year.
So that should help with their domestic routes, at least.
Definitely. Crucial for connectivity and, hopefully, generating some much-needed revenue. Their current fleet is quite small, just 6 aircraft operating out of Kathmandu.
Okay, let's travel now to East Africa. RwandAir seems to be making some strategic moves.
Yes, really interesting developments there. The CEO, Ivan Makolo, announced a shift in focus. They're expanding routes within Eastern and Southern Africa and boosting frequencies across the continent.
Why the shift? Is it just spotting new opportunities?
That's part of it. They're looking at underserved destinations, planning new direct flights to Mombasa and Zanzibar, for example. But there's another key reason. It's also a reaction to losing access to DR Congo's airspace. That forced them to suspend flights to several cities like Brazzaville, Abuja, Cotonou.
Ah, I see. So they're basically redeploying the capacity they can no longer use on those routes.
Exactly. Instead of just parking planes or taking a hit, they're pivoting to strengthen their position in other parts of Africa where they can fly. A proactive response.
Makes sense. And they have bigger plans too, right? Fleet growth.
Oh, yeah. Quite ambitious. They aim to double their fleet from the current 14 aircraft within the next 5 years.
14 aircraft currently. What's the mix like?
It's a varied fleet. They've got Airbus A330s for longer routes, Boeing 737s, including a freighter version, plus some regional CRJ-900s and Dash 8 Q400 turboprops. A good mix for their network.
And this expansion is aimed at driving revenue, obviously. How have they been doing financially?
Actually, quite well recently. They showed a really strong recovery last year. Revenue jumped 82% compared to 2022.
82%. That's impressive.
It really is. Up to about 435 million US dollars from around 239 million the year before, reversing a previous downward trend.
But it's not all smooth sailing in Africa, is it? Operating costs are often cited as a major challenge.
Absolutely. The CEO specifically mentioned that. High costs for fuel, taxes, airport charges, maintenance, even overflight fees. It all adds up and makes tickets expensive.
And what's RwandAir doing about that?
They're tackling it on multiple fronts, engaging with airports and governments to try and address those external costs, but also implementing internal measures. Things like fuel-efficient flying practices, streamlining the fleet to reduce training and staffing costs, smart management.
So putting it all together, quite a picture emerges, doesn't it?
It really does. You see the direct impact of geopolitics on airline deals in India.
Then the persistent struggle with legacy debt for a carrier like Nepal Airlines.
And contrasted with RwandAir's strategic agility, adapting to regional issues and pushing hard for growth despite the high operating costs in Africa.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is. Government policy, airline strategy, financial realities, global events. It's constantly shifting.
Absolutely. These aren't isolated stories. They show the dynamic, often unpredictable nature of this industry. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some valuable context on these specific situations.
Definitely. It leaves you thinking, though, what underlying trend really stands out to you from these examples, and what might that signal for the future of air travel, maybe in these regions or even more broadly? Something to keep an eye on.